Hello and welcome to the Navigating Neurodiversity podcast. I'm Vivian, registered psychologist, and today we have a very special guest with us, Mary Lian Payamal. Mary Lian is someone who knows dyslexia inside out. As an educational psychologist, she does both assessments as well as interventions for individuals with dyslexia. She's also a mother of four, two of whom have dyslexia, so Lian is also very familiar with the parenting journey. So today, I'm very honoured to have Lian with us, and we'll be talking about the topic of dyslexia intervention. I'll also add that Lian was actually my first supervisor when I joined MOE Psychological Services branch, and this was way back in 2006. So happy to have Lian with us today. Now maybe to start off, I'm just going to ask Lian to share a little bit about her journey so far in terms of her career and how she came to this point as an educational psychologist who is interested in dyslexia intervention. Yeah.
All right, thanks Viv, and it's really nice to be here and to see that you have set up your own practice now in this beautiful location. Yeah. So looking back at my career, I actually started out as a psychologist in a special school, working with children with very low intellectual disability. And one of the things that we had to do at that time was intake assessment. So we had children that were referred from the mainstream schools at P3, P4, P5, and we had to kind of assess whether they're suitable to be enrolled in the special school. And I recalled then that I had to do some simple activities with the kids, simple worksheets, and one of the first thing is, can you just write your name? And I realized that many of them would just stare at me blankly or very embarrassed that they're not even able to put their name down on a worksheet. And it really tugged at my heartstring, children who couldn't read and write and even write their name, because I was thinking how many years have gone by in school, how many worksheets have been given to them and they couldn't even put down their name. So I started to teach them to write their names and using this method called backward training. And I realized that actually with a bit of explicit teaching, just a few minutes, they could write their first name. And then their eyes would kind of like light up, and I just felt it was really meaningful to teach children to read and write. Yeah.
Right. So that was one of the
So
incidents.
that was, I think when I look back, that was probably the start of it all. And after a few years as a psychologist expert, I decided to go into teaching. So then I went to NIE and to be trained as a primary school teacher. And then after that, MOE sent me for further studies to be a learning support coordinator, working with children with very low language and literacy skills in like pull-out program. Yeah, and then after that, they sent me to do my postgrad in educational psych. And then when I came back to MOE, I was always involved in improving the learning support programs in school and creating dyslexia awareness. So that's how I started, even before I became a parent of a child with dyslexia. Yeah.
Thanks, Lian, for sharing with us your background and the journey. So you started out in a special school, then followed by learning support coordinator before you became an educational psychologist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna dive now into the topic. So I think as part of our training as psychs, one of the things that were very strongly ingrained in us was to reference the research, the literature, and the evidence base. So maybe let's start there. So please share with us some of your insights about the science of reading and how that relates to dyslexia.
All right. I think the vast scientific research that came out of the science of reading, it's really exciting and has kind of offered us really valuable insights into the reading development, the reading process, and how reading should be taught. And for many decades now, you see, if you think about the science of reading, the backdrop of it, right? For many decades, there has been this debate, in fact, a very heated debate between two camps. one camp of educators that believe that reading should be taught in a whole language approach, that reading like language is natural and therefore should be taught in that in that immersive environment of contextual reading and meaning making. And then the other camp, right, is the one that believe in the bottom-up approach where you need to teach it, systematically building from, letter names to letter sounds to decoding of words and then build up to vocabulary and fluency and then comprehension. So these two camps, all right, has been, having this heated debate to, there's this term called the reading war that kind of caused a lot of confusion for educators and parents. And so now actually with the science of reading, which is this whole big scientific research that has come about from really a diverse field of professionals, has kind of converged and concurred on what actually is the reading development and the reading process and how it should be taught. So I'm really hoping that this will kind of help parents and educators to kind of discern what is the right way and not just whose voice is louder and go by popular practice and things like that. Yeah, so one of the most interesting thing for me was the findings from the neuroscientists, which use a lot of brain imaging, which kind of demonstrated the whole reading process, and they kind of show that our brain is made up of many different parts, right? We call it the reading brain, and there are different processes. And the brain is also like a muscle. So when you don't work on that certain part of the brain, it affects the whole network of the brain. So for example, like if you were to teach the sound, like SH makes the sh sound, right? So if you teach this, then that part of the brain will fire up, the phonological processor. And from there, it forms, with enough firing, you kind of form that neural pathway that will affect the whole reading brain. So what is really interesting is that what they found is that it's not just children with dyslexia that requires has this particular process in learning to read. In fact, all of us learn to read in pretty much a similar fashion, which is something that I would say is a new insight to many, because many believe that systematic phonics instruction should only children with dyslexia require that approach, not the general classroom. Yeah.
Okay, so earlier, Lian, you were talking about the two camps, right? The two approaches. So one is like just reading and incidentally picking it up, and the other one is more like explicit teaching. I think some of us might think, like, well, I kind of went through the kind of just read whole word approach. So nobody really taught me when I was a kid, like phonics and everything, And then some of my parents do say that, like, hey, I didn't go through that phonics approach, but I learned how to read. So how would you explain that?
Yeah, it certainly feels that way. Yeah, when I look back at how I learned to read, or when I look back at my two middle children, they learn it so quickly that we can't quite see what was happening. But what is really insightful from the science of reading, from the brain imaging from the neuroscientists, is that when they look at a pre-literate brain moving towards a literate brain, it's the same sequence of neural pathways that are actually being formed. So whether you have dyslexia or no dyslexia, you go through that same sequence of learning. You actually actually mapping, the printed letters to the sounds, to the speech sounds. But you do it so quickly that you don't realize that you are actually doing that. So what they find is that there isn't so much a separate brain, but all of us actually go through that same sequence.
I see. So I suppose would you say that has influenced the way that instruction is carried out these days, in terms of like instead of separating kids into two different classes, right, for literacy instruction, we would say you all should start on the same basis, like the quality first teaching.
Yes, that's right. So what the Science of Reading is recommending is that your instructions, your curriculum, the way you teach should align with what the evidence is showing now, which is to teach phonics in a very systematic way to all children. It will benefit most of the children in your classroom, including those with dyslexia. So it's not so much that children with dyslexia need a separate program. They need additional, more intensive, more strategic, more explicit instruction in the phonics. The pace is different, but in terms of content, they need to be taught the content even for the regular kids. Yeah. I really hope that educators will really look at what the Science of Reading is telling us and align their practice. So I think the Science of Reading has actually given very clear directions on what is aligned and not aligned with the evidence. So for example, using onset rhymes is actually not aligned with the evidence. The Science of Reading says that in order to teach, we need to use systematic phonics and we get children to sound out phoneme by phoneme rather than using word families. The other very common practice of using sight word drills is actually not aligned. So what the Science of Reading is saying is that even for sight words, most of the sounds are actually decodable. So you need to actually first teach them how to sound out the word. So for example, the word this, right? So it's made up of 3 sounds, so put together is this. So you actually teach the child that the word this is made up of the 3 sounds, and this is how you break the word into individual sounds and how you blend it. But after that, you can use your sight word drills to develop automaticity and not the reverse, which is to use your flashcards and hoping that by looking at it multiple times, they will remember what the word looked like. So what we want is for children to really struggle with the decoding, and when they struggle and try to sound out, that's where that firing is going to happen in the brain and the neural networks is going to form.
I see. So a common question we get from parents also is about what about words that are non-decodable, things which it's very hard to teach them to sound like, and it feels like they have to memorize the word in a way. What would you...
Right. So even for words, right, there are very, very few words that are really completely non-decodable. Usually, even in what we call irregular words, they only have maybe one sound that is irregular. Most words, let's say should, you will have sh, u, d, so you will still have all the sounds. So there is this method called the HART method, right? So whereby you look at the word, and usually for most of these sight words, the child would already know the first sound and the last sound. Let's say they've already learned should, they've already learned that SH makes the sh sound and D make the D sound. But they may not know the OUL in the middle. So we say, okay, you draw a little heart on OUL, and that's the part that you learn by heart.
I see.
So they still try to use, it's not like 2 different methods. They still try to decode it first and then look at which part they have to learn by heart. And they have to learn by heart because they still have not learned that OU can make the O sound. But actually OU can make the O sound. So eventually they would be able to sound out the whole word as well most of the time. Yeah.
Okay, great. That's really helpful. Okay, for parents who are looking out for dyslexia interventions, right? I think they might come across a lot of names, like Orton-Gillingham, Linda Bell, so there are a lot of different approaches out there, and it can be pretty confusing, I think, for many of our parents. So in your opinion, because you're quite familiar, you've been trained in Spalding as well as OG, right? And also know some of these other approaches. What do you think are the key features of effective dyslexia intervention that we should be looking out for, regardless of what programs and so on? What are the key things that should be present?
Right. I think for any evidence-based dyslexia remediation program that's effective, it goes back to the roots of being based on that set of phonograms developed by Samuel Orton and Orton-Gillingham. We call it the OG phonograms, right? But the scope and sequence and the programs can differ. So there are many programs that kind of spring out of these OG phonograms. So first of all, I think for parents is to look at what is that set of phonograms, how is it taught, usually it's based on OG. Right? So the other key features, or what we call the secret ingredients, right, would be that this set of phonograms have to be taught in a very systematic manner. So there is a very clear scope and sequence, and we kind of build up with teaching the children the basic consonants and vowels, going into digraphs, and then we go into vowel teams, R-control vowels, and so forth. And these phonograms are kind of taught in context, right, with words and sentences, and it slowly builds up. The other thing to look out for is that these instructions are taught in a very systematic manner. So children are taught phonemic awareness, how to segment a word, how to blend a word, how to count the number of sounds in a word. And the phonograms are taught in a very cumulative, systematic manner, building from consonants to vowels to digraphs to vowel themes, etc. And then alongside that, the children are taught to kind of apply these phonograms into the decoding of words, right? And building up from short words to longer words to multisyllabic words. The other feature would be that it has to be taught explicitly. So if I were to teach, say, the phonogram, like earlier I mentioned, right? I will say this phonogram and I will show the SH, and I say this phonogram is made up of two consonants, S and H, but together they make one sound, and we call this phonogram a digraph. Okay, and this digraph it can happen in the beginning of the word or at the end of the word, and I'll show multiple examples. So I'll say shh. Okay, can you look at me? Can you say it together with me? Shh. And then we practice the sound. So it's done in a very explicit way with multiple examples, right? So that's explicitness would be the second feature. And then the third feature is that we want it to be very interactive. So as I teach you, I want to give you a lot of opportunities to respond, and I want to give you a lot of feedback as well as you respond. And then how to use multisensory approaches, right? Not just multisensory, but simultaneous multisensory. So I want you to say as you write, at the same time. So it's not like just having making use of different type of objects that are sensory, but doing it simultaneously. Then the fourth thing is this idea of overlearning. So whatever I teach you, I want to teach to automaticity, right? So in terms of the sounds, I want to teach to automaticity. In terms of the reading, like earlier I told you, the sight words, I may first teach you how to decode it, but after that I can still use the drills to teach to automaticity. And I want to provide that distributed practice and frequent practice and cumulative practice. And it's so essential because we know that the dyslexia brain, they have deficits in that that phonological part of the brain, right? And the brain is a muscle, and we need to kind of get it to practice and exercise before it would really kind of form the neural network, and then we'll have that structural changes that occurs, and that's what we want to see, right? And lastly, I think if you want to see whether this is a good practice, you want to see that the practitioner is very diagnostic about it. Progress monitoring is being done. at least once every, I would say at least minimally once every 8 sessions, okay, if not more frequent. Yeah, but the progress monitoring is also ongoing. So at every session, they should be teaching to mastery. They should be actually recording the number of sounds the child can do, but not at the automatic level. And then in terms of applying to words and in terms of spelling rules, again, whether they can retrieve it and whether they can retrieve it automatically. So that would be what I mean by diagnostic. Yeah, the practitioner has to be quite diagnostic about it. So if you have these 5 features, I would say you got a solid program.
Good, thanks.
Yeah.
I think that really helps us to kind of demystify this whole black box of dyslexia intervention and what actually goes on. So a lot of systematic, explicit teaching. And you know, Lian is one of the few educational psychologists I know that is trained in the OG, Orton-Gillingham approach, as well as Spalding. That's right, yeah. So I'll be really interested to hear your thoughts about, you know, you've been trained on both programs. What do you see as some of the similarities or maybe some of the distinct features of each one?
All right. I think both programs is aligned with the science of reading. Okay, so first of all, if you look at the evidence, it's aligned. Spalding was actually a student of Orton. And so she came out with her own program. It's the same set of phonograms, but she changes the scope and sequence a little bit, and the instructional routines, I personally find them a lot more powerful. And the interesting thing about the Spalding approach is called the writing road to reading, right? And it's most approach will go from reading to writing. But for Spalding, she goes from writing to reading, and she says because children are very motivated when they come to school to learn how to write. And when you teach all the sub-skills of learning to spell, you actually covers all the sub-skills involved in reading. So you can never find a speller who's not a reader, but you can find a reader who is not a speller. And I think we have seen a lot.
So true, yes.
They have gone for some phonics program. They can read, but they cannot spell, right? And for Spalding, she focused a lot on spelling. And the other thing is that in terms of the scope and sequence, when the sounds are taught, let's say if I show you the phonogram E, I will teach you both sounds simultaneously, and you will say E, right? I don't teach you that letter E says F first, and then wait a few months later, then tell you that actually there is this long E sound E. I tell you right away that it has 2 sounds, F, E, and that A has 3 sounds, F, A, R. So what happens then is that these phonograms are applied to all the high frequency words, what we call sight words, high frequency words, immediately. So for example, the word he, me, she, we, the E sounds make E. It does not make the S sound.
Yes.
Right? And these are in children's oral vocab. They are seeing it in print all the time because they're high frequency words. They're using it all the time. So every time when they see and when they talk and when they write, they can now link the speech sound to print. So he is E, me is E, because E makes E at the end of the syllable. So it's taught in such a way, and all the phonograms are applied to the high frequency words that are already in the children's oral vocab. So I find that very powerful, and in fact now what the Science of Reading has found, that in addition to what we call the big 5 in reading instruction, right? Phonemic awareness, systematic phonics, vocab, fluency and comprehension, they have found that there is this strong relationship between learning to spell and learning to read. So learning to spell is actually a very critical component now in literacy. Yeah.
Yes. So Lian, do you have your own preferred dyslexia intervention approach, and why?
Well, so my preferred approach is the Spalding writing road to reading. For exactly that reason, that you really can't find a speller who is not a reader. And also I teach the phonograms by integrating handwriting in it, so that the children straight away they correct their handwriting, and a lot of us don't realize how important handwriting is, but when they are able to link the sequence of the handwriting to the sounds, they are able to kind of remember it better and read and spell better.
So if we are able to identify the kids early and put them through a quality intervention, technically we should be able to remediate to a large extent, right, the problems that they're facing. However, the reality of the current situation, what we see is that many kids, they do slip through the cracks, they don't get identified early, or they don't get access to that quality intervention that they really need. So the fact of the matter is we do have national exams and things like that, so we do still want to support them in some way, right? So that's where access arrangements and exemptions might come in. So I just want to get your thoughts about, these areas and maybe what more could be done.
I think we have a whole range of access arrangements, right? From extra time to reader to prompter and so forth, which I think is sufficient for most of the students. But more can be done. So I know of many students, especially the secondary school students with dyslexia, reading-wise they are fine already, but they still take longer in terms of language processing, and they find listening comprehension really, really tough because no extra time is given for listening compre, and they can't catch what the passage, when it's being read out to them, they can't catch it fast enough. And we know that in other countries there are other accommodations are provided, like how they could actually pause the recording to give the students more time to process and to hear it before answering. So these are some things that I still hope that we can do more in terms of access arrangements.
Yes. About exemptions, do you have any?
Yeah, in terms of exemptions, well, I think I think one of the thing is about mother tongue exemption, isn't it? A lot of our children are already struggling with one language, and they have to put in a lot of effort just to learn reading, learn English, and attend rather intensive remediation programs that give them very little time for the other subjects. So it's really a huge struggle. And dyslexia doesn't just impact English, right? It also impacts the other languages, be it the alphabetic language like Tamil or Malay, or the non-alphabetic language like Chinese, where it also involves a lot of phonological processing because it's a tonal language, isn't it? So those are aspects that our children with dyslexia really struggle. And while mother tongue exemption is that provision is available to them, it really comes at a cost, right? So they are penalized because even though they did not sit for the exam, they are given a score. And when you put it all together, they may not meet cutoff for certain programs or schools that they want to go. So it will limit their options.
Absolutely. I completely agree, and I think that's one policy that I've got quite strong views about as well, because we've seen so many real life examples in our practice of students having been affected by this limited options, and really students whom I feel should have the opportunity to access really great programs out there, you call it top schools, IB schools, and so on, but not having the opportunity to do that because of being penalized for their disorder or disability, like you may. Yeah, so I think we have the same hope about this being reviewed someday, right? But to end off, maybe Lian, to share with us, one key message that you have for parents as well as professionals working with individuals with dyslexia.
I think one of the most important thing is also to look into their social emotional needs, right? Because there are also children that are really very frustrated, and that becomes what we call a social emotional motivational barrier to learning. And sometimes that has to be addressed first. We want to teach them phonics and all that, but some of them already have some bad experience or phobia towards it because it was not taught to them in the right way. So we must remember that I always say we must give them that hope, that optimism that they will improve with time, and how you do it is to give them a taste and experience of success. And we say success breeds success. If they don't think that they're going to be successful in learning to read, and they come to the conclusion that, oh, I'm just a child, I'm just a boy that cannot read, or I'm just a girl that cannot read, then it's very hard to move further. So give them that taste of success, and as a parent, just enjoy reading with them first. Don't be too hard on like trying to get them to learn phonics, and because you want to really build that parent-child relationship. You want to build that relationship with books, that it's a very enjoyable parent-child bonding time when you read to them. So don't make it like a testing session where you're like testing whether they can read. That's going to spoil everything. Lastly, I'd like to say that dyslexia is a gift. Having 2 children with dyslexia and 2 so-called neurotypical, their thinking is very different, very refreshing. They are creative, they are innovative. I enjoy listening to them, and I think children with dyslexia really make good entrepreneurs as well. So really learn to appreciate and hear what they have to say, and enjoy your children and their dyslexic brain. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lian. I mean, that was so insightful, and I really hope that parents as well as professionals, you found this session, this conversation really helpful. If you've got any questions or comments, feel free to let us know. Thank you again, Lian, for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks,
All right. Bye-bye.
I don't think I'm the pioneer.